Always head-turners are the cars in the Retro Rallycross Championship. This is day one of a double-header of action here at Pembrake. Brian Hardman topped the times in Q1, Gary Simpson in Q2 and Q3. They will be at the front of the grid with Steve Cousins in the ex-Dan Rook Citroën AX for company. Last time out, the cars had a non-championship outing, supporting World Rallycross at Silverstone. Back for points here. Gary Simpson is on pole, Brian Hardman and Steve Cousins on row one. It's John Cross and Mark Finch on row two, from Simon Hart, Phil Collard and Paul Smith on the back. As the lights go green, Gary Simpson storms away, but a good start by Brian Hardman then. The rallyman in the Mark II Escort, John Cross, gets up the inside in the Lancia Stratos. Mark Finch forced out wide in the background. John Cross all sideways. Whoops, the door comes open. The air-conditioned Stratos then, and John Cross will try and grab hold of that when he's not too busy. See if he can slam it shut. There he goes. Through the chicane then. The Lancia Stratos taking you back to the likes of Andy Benzer, for example, who was a great star in European Rallycross in the 70s and early 80s with a Stratos. And down he comes towards the hairpin. Brakes hard. He's got the Citroën AX behind him. As for the race lead, they're side by side, and a sideways Simpson is in danger of losing out here. Brian Hardman goes ahead of him in the Escort. Hardman goes through. Two-wheel drive cars all. There's no four-wheel drive machinery in this race, so they're fighting for grip. Front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive as they come across the loose. Hardman then across the loose section at Hanson's. Remember, there's also no joker lap in Retro Rallycross. They didn't do joker laps in period. We don't do them now. Onto the tarmac. Salvation for all of them. Suddenly there's grip levels again. Back on the power. Steve Cousins tries to get up alongside John Cross in the Lancia, but he can't do it. So Brian Hardman is the race leader, and Gary Simpson's newer BMW, a former Super National car, that chasing after the Mark II. John Cross, who can trace his competition origins all the way back to 1975. Former owner of Autocross, the property developer now, has done a bit of circuit racing, but then back into Rallycross 2 years ago after a 17-year absence. And the bugger's bitten again. He's built up this new Stratos, and there he is, keeping at bay Steve Cousins. Mark Finch, best of the rest. There he is in the Fiesta. Through he turns with the very smart Mark I Escort in the hands of Simon Hart next up, the replica of John Taylor's 1973 European Championship car. So there is John Cross going through. Up through the gears. Towards Taylor's he will go, the chicane. Now that's Gary Simpson hard at work, but at the moment he hasn't got an answer to Brian Hardman. The Mark II Escort, taking you back to the fact that there were hordes of them, hundreds of them, across Rallycross within the mid-80s. In the UK, it was largely John Welch versus Tony Drummond who were the star drivers in them. In Europe, Martin Skanka had an Escort Mark II, of course, although his, mighty with its turbocharged engine. But they were the car to have in the quicker division to take on the Porsches and the occasional TL7 or the Lotus Esprit of Jimmy Mavropoulos for a time. And it's great to have Mark II Escort representation, because so many were built, so many, though, have disappeared through either rallying or rallycross or circuit racing. There are relatively few still around, but Brian Hardman doing a good job up front. Gary Simpson hanging on a second place with the 325i BMW. John Cross third. So the Lancia Stratos under attack for the rather impudent Citroën AX there, which runs out of road. Steve Cousins heads for the grass verge, the ex-Super National racer. He drove a V6 Clio and a Lotus Exige in that. This, the car that Dan Rook, former British champion, started his career in. Lead battle, well and truly joined once again, isn't it? Look, because Gary Simpson is coming back at the Escort here. The gap is down. They pendulum across the loose. Back onto the power they go again. There is Steve Cousins paddling his way through the wet, slippy infield course. Simon Hart next up. He goes over that loose surface. And that ultra-smart Escort, not the quickest car, but it's just a joy to see it. Takes you back to the very early days of the sport when John Taylor, who'd been a jockey, ridden for the Queen, came into the sport and was up against the likes of Rob Chapman. So there is the Mark I Escort in the Haynes of Maidstone colours. And John Taylor was back at the NEC a couple of years ago as part of the 50-year celebrations of Rallycross. Up front, we've still got Brian Hardman fighting against the BMW here. Across the loose goes Brian Hardman's Mark II. You've got Gary Simpson locking up He's got the pace, he just can't quite find a way past the Mark II Escort. Try as he might, but Hardman goes a little bit wide. Is this a chance for Simpson? Yes, it is. He's alongside. There's contact. He's still on the outside line. Hardman gets squeezed onto the grass on the inside. Can Gary Simpson get the power down? Can he go for the race lead? He's on the outside line. It's the longer line. It's the slower line. They start the last lap, but he goes through. Good move. Round the outside goes Gary Simpson. He picks up the place, goes into the lead, starting the last lap here at Pembrey. You have some sympathy for Brian Hardman. He has led race long, but Gary Simpson strikes right at the end as Paul Smith there in the G40 shaped polo comes through somewhat distant, it's got to be said. The Volkswagen vehicle technician down the back end of the pack as John Cross keeps Steve Cousins at bay. So Gary Simpson looks as though he's on target for a win. He won his class at Silverstone at the start of the year, and he's going to win outright here too. John Cross hanging on to third for the podium. Checkered flag is at the ready. It's going to be a win for Gary Simpson as he blasts up towards the timing line. There, second is Brian Hardman. He's going to be in second spot, and John Cross will be third, or will he? Steve Cousins comes up to attack, but no, John Cross does it on the line. Steve Cousins take fourth, but there is the man of the day. Gary Simpson in the BMW wins in the Retro Rallycross final at Pembrey. There's another day of action to come tomorrow as Paul Smith heads for the timing line in the polo. For the race, it's a win for Gary Simpson with Brian Hardman just under a second adrift. John Cross takes third from Steve Cousins and Mark Finch. Simon Hart and Paul Smith in seventh spot. For the championship, Steve Cousins ahead of Simon Hart and Mark Finch in the Retro Rallycross Championship. In Super Retro, Gary Simpson is clear by 11 points of John Cross.